And now, we'll hear from Alberta Liberal Opposition Leader, Dr. David Swann.
Good evening, fellow Albertans. I'm Dr. David Swann, leader of the Alberta Liberal Opposition. As a physician for nearly 30 years, Albertans have trusted me to give them the straight goods on their health, their risks, their options. It's truly an honor to have the opportunity to speak with you tonight in reply to the Premier's address. Decades ago, a different PC Premier introduced us to Martha and Henry, which he described as the average Albertan couple. The Martha and Henrys he spoke of are now retired, many enjoying their golden years after a lifetime of hard work building this great province, while others are trying to stretch every dollar of their fixed income just to make ends meet. Tonight, I want to talk to you about Martha and Henry's families. Alberta has changed. The average Albertan could come from a variety of ethnic or religious backgrounds and may hold a range of cultural and political beliefs. We respect them all. Their progressive priorities are our priorities. That's why I want to take a moment at the beginning to say thank you to this new generation of Albertans. Recently, you helped Alberta Liberals in our efforts to make our schools safer and more inclusive by making gay-straight alliances mandatory anywhere they're requested. The PCs didn't want to do it at first, but you did. You spoke up, you wrote letters, you rallied, and you won. So again, thank you. But we're not done yet. We still have more work to do to protect our children and our communities. Right now, children are not allowed to bring peanuts or other allergens into schools because of the impact they may have on another student. But despite the overwhelming evidence of the effectiveness and safety of school vaccines, the province still refuses to take meaningful action to immunize students against potentially life-threatening diseases. This government is afraid of how some parents or school boards might react. They were similarly worried when it came to allowing gay-straight alliances, but in the end, there was only one right choice to be made. Other jurisdictions have shown that when parents are confronted with the facts about immunization and asked to make a conscious choice, they often decide that the safety of their children and community is paramount to all other concerns. This is what we'd like to see done in our province as well. Albertans are also telling us that they believe in equal pay for work of equal value. Far too many people in this province are getting shortchanged on their paychecks. It's not right, and we're going to fight to change this. There are also those who may need medical help to start a family, but cannot afford the high costs of fertility treatment. We want to ensure more funding is available for them so that the ability to have a family isn't dependent on how much money people have in their pockets. Parents that do have children are also struggling just to find affordable childcare spaces. That's why we believe it's time for a universal low-cost daycare program and for the government to keep its commitment to fund all-day kindergarten, which not only spurs a child's development, it helps keep parents working. Lastly, this government needs to get serious about ending child poverty. We want all our children to reach their full potential. Studies clearly show that every dollar spent in this area saves 7 more later on. In a province as wealthy as Alberta, no child should go hungry. Another major priority for this new generation of Albertans is support for our cities and towns. Our schools, hospitals, and public transit lines need to be built as promised and on time. Putting up a sign in the field and cutting a ribbon is just the first step. There is still a long way to go until our children have actual places to learn. Chronically underfunded municipalities simply do not have the resources needed to keep up with this growing demand. They need stable, predictable funding from the province if they ever hope to provide all the services citizens count on. And we believe education is an investment, not a cost to be cut. We need to hire more staff, reduce class sizes, and make schools into community hubs. Parents shouldn't have to pay unreasonable school fees either. The province should step up and eliminate them. Young students want better options for pursuing a trade or a university degree when they graduate from school, but they don't want to be saddled with massive debt. Currently, the government of Alberta spends over $17 billion a year on health care, but barely attains average results while more than $1 billion in deferred health facility maintenance has led to the deplorable conditions we've seen at the foothills in Calgary and the Misericordia in West Edmonton. Martha and Henry's families want ambulances to be available when they need them, to get into emergency departments quickly, and to not have to wait for hours suffering and pain. They don't want their surgeries canceled either. They want to get back on the job, back home to their families, and back to good health. Lastly, it seems everyone agrees with Alberta Liberals that our current electricity prices are too volatile. Bills are too confusing, and power generators shouldn't be allowed to manipulate supply in order to jack up the prices. The government made us a promise years ago that deregulation would result in a better deal, but some of us are still waiting for that promise to be fulfilled. The final major difference between what the Premier is proposing and what Alberta Liberals stand for is trusted leadership for all Albertans when it comes to our province's finances, not just new management. We may be facing challenging times ahead, which is why it is important for you to know that you have an alternative to what the Premier is offering. Now, I don't know what the Premier may have told you, but there is nothing to justify more cuts to frontline services or placing heavier burdens on the backs of hardworking Albertans. Nor is it prudent to spend millions of dollars on an unnecessary election just so that he can reassert his grasp on power. What I do know is that the Premier is eager for us to forget the mistakes of the past. However, we cannot simply turn a blind eye to them. The Premier wanted us to look in the mirror and reflect on how we got here, and many of us have. And we saw that it was not Albertans' fault. I don't know about you, but I was offended when I heard the government proudly declare that it was somehow an Alberta advantage to give away over $11 billion in corporate tax breaks. And it's obvious that the flat tax simply doesn't work for the majority of Albertans. It is hard to justify asking people who are working for minimum wage to pay the same tax rate as the vice president of a bank. Those with lower incomes need the relief that only comes by asking the wealthy to pay their fair share. The same goes for big multinational corporations and smaller companies or family-run businesses. We could eliminate small business taxes entirely by adjusting the amount large corporations pay by only 1%. And of course, we need to create a market for renewables and low-carbon energy in order to reduce pollution and the impacts of global warming. But unlike those who may demonize our province's largest industry or who categorically seek to shut down the oil sands, we believe in working cooperatively, not antagonistically, with all stakeholders in an effort to protect both our economy and our environment. Alberta Liberals also recognize that pipelines are the safest, most reliable way to transport our valued energy products to global markets. But we differ from the government in our belief that the protection of our environment should not be left up to the honor system. We need tougher standards, independent monitoring, and stiffer fines for those who break the rules. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a story. It's a story I think illustrates the fundamental difference between the PC government's approach and that of the Alberta Liberals. Early one morning when my daughter and her family were staying with us, I heard a strange noise coming from somewhere in the house. Still half asleep, I grabbed a baseball bat that I keep nearby for such an occasion and went to investigate. It was coming from the kitchen, and when I entered, I saw my 3-year-old grandson, Case, rummaging around in the refrigerator. He'd been walking in his sleep, so I picked him up and took him back to bed. I decided to stay with him for a while, and as I lay there peacefully in the pitch black next to my grandson, suddenly his tiny hand reached out and grabbed me square in the face. I took his hand and held it for a few minutes before I let it go, but a little while later, he did it again. What I realized is that in the darkness, he was checking to see if I was still there. Albertans who find themselves in difficult or unfamiliar circumstances want to know someone is going to be there for them as well. There are times when all they need is a helping hand, someone who will support them until a difficult moment passes. In those instances, words won't cut it. People need to see it and feel it. It needs to be real. We know Martha and Henry's families want progressive leadership every day, not just when it's politically convenient. Since the birth of this province, Alberta Liberals have always been there for Albertans, and we always will be. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to what's sure to be the start of an ongoing conversation over the next few days and months. I look forward to seeing many of you again and continuing this conversation as we conduct our budget consultations. Good night.